Welcome back to Throwback Thursday, and this week we're going to be talking about Season 3, Episode 7 of The Walking Dead, titled When the Dead Come Knocking. And the episode starts out with Merle interrogating Glenn inside a little shack, inside this little, I guess this is where he keeps him, probably far away from everybody because they don't want anybody to know what they do to outsiders at all. They want everybody to be, and this is actually very interesting because I never, when I watched this the first time, I never looked at these episodes the way I'm looking at them now. And this is basically like an allegory about immigration in a sense. Like you have the governor who's in charge of this town, Woodbury. It's like a country. And any community that's outside of his country, they're not taking anybody in. And they don't want anybody being really close to them at all. So that's what this episode is basically about. But Merle wants to get to his brother. He wants to know where his brother is, and he kind of wants revenge on Rick and T-Dog. But Glenn tells him, because he's interrogating him, and Glenn says, listen, man, we went back for you. We did go back for you. Like, we're not bad people. We left you there. We know it's fucked up. We tried to lock the door, but we went back for you. And he's like, I went, Rick went, Daryl went, and so did T-Dog. And then, Merle has to say something racist. He's like, oh, yeah, that spear chucker that left me up there and lost the key or whatever the fuck. And he goes, how is he? And he goes, he didn't make it. And he goes, I hope he went slow. And then he starts, trying to torment Glenn. And he takes his knife hand and puts it underneath Glenn's nose, like telling him, like, listen, we're going to torture you unless you tell us where are you guys held up. I want to know where you're holding up. And Glenn doesn't budge. And then finally, Merle says, you're a lot tougher than I remember. You were the sneaky one, and now you're a lot tougher than the last time I remembered you. And he goes, I like that or whatever. And then he goes, let's see about that girl, if she's as tough as you, basically. And Glenn just headbutts him. And Glenn is tied to this chair. He can't get out. So he headbutts him in the same nose that Michonne broke like the last episode, or which would be 2 days, maybe a day ago. So, then he starts beating the shit out of Glenn, and the episode starts. Very interesting, like the way it started. Then we cut back to the prison where Michonne's standing outside the gate and Rick's just looking at her, and as she's holding the baby formula, and finally she puts her hand on the gate, and the walkers next to her, they're ignoring her because she has the walker blood on her, but the walker next to her smells the blood that's on her hand. So they start overwhelming her. She cuts them off and she finally faints and passes out, and that's when Rick and Carl come out and they help Michonne. They bring her inside. And they said she's not coming into with the rest of us because we don't know who she is yet. And Michonne tries to go grab her sword at this point, but Rick throws it away and says, listen, we're not going to hurt you. We're not going to do anything to you. What's your name? She doesn't tell her their name. And he goes, listen, we're going to take care of you. We're going to fix your wound. And then she goes, I didn't ask for your help. It goes, doesn't matter. We can't let you go. So the difference here, because when I originally saw this, I was like, why is she so different between the way Rick and them are? She acts different towards them right away, instantly, pretty much. And with the governor, well, it's because she saw those guys that were alive, technically, and that they came and they just slaughtered them. And then the excuse the governor gave them was bullshit. In this situation, she approached them, and they came and they helped her out. And they already told her, like, look, we don't trust you. We're going to keep you here away from us. They're not trying to put on a facade, basically. Daryl comes out and goes, who's that? He says, we'll talk about it later, because here you got to see something. Shows her that Carol's alive. So Carol finds out that Lori died. She starts crying. Good scene between Rick and Carol. Glad we only had one episode of Rick being like, it's going to come back, being crazy Rick. But it was good. And the way they set up these episodes in earlier seasons, going back and forth between different characters, A, B, and C story most of the time, was much better than what they do later on. That I will say, because I remember at one point I'm like, I don't want to follow an episode of this fucking character, Tara. I don't give a fuck about her. But I'm not saying that's true because I don't remember. I'm saying it like I can't remember. But they will always focus on one character later on, and I didn't like it. This one, there are storylines like what we're going to get to soon that are boring and dull. We cut back to Woodbury for a brief second, and that's when the governor sees Andrea and tells her, I need you to do something, which is going to be the other story that's kind of boring, which is Andrea's going to be helping Milton try to see if he could get a response. I don't know why this is like Milton's first time. This doesn't make any sense, too. this is just done for story purposes, but it wasn't really thought into because they had a bunch of walkers and they've had people living in their community for a while. If this is the first person in the community that died of natural causes, that's a little bit bizarre. You know, even if it wasn't, if somebody else was bit in the community or outside, wouldn't they bring him to Melton and see, you know, after he passes? So it doesn't make any sense. So, but whatever. So they're doing that. That's another storyline where Andrea's going to be helping Milton try to see this old man. He's dying, and they have items around the room to remind him of his life. They ask him questions, and they do this thing over and over with this man. He has to answer the questions, and they're hoping that when he passes, when he comes back to life as a walker, that he'll remember some of the things around the room, and he can answer, and that this way, you know, this is basically the governor wants to try to get his daughter, you know, also to come back and see if there's a cure. Same thing like with Herschel, thinking that there might be a cure out there, keeping these walkers inside the barn. You know, I don't know, I haven't watched the show in a very long time, but it'd be kind of fucked up if there was a cure, wouldn't it? We go back to the prison, and Rick tells him, look, we get you food and water and set you on your way. But at first, we want to know, how'd you find us? Like, what do you do? Why did you bring this stuff to us? So she tells them the supplies were dropped by an Asian boy and a girl, and that, you know, and they were taken by the same guy who shot her. And Rick goes to torture mode because he doesn't know if she is a plant and this is all a setup and they are taken, but it's all to see how they react or, you know, how they proceed and if she's in on it. And he goes and grabs her leg, her wound, and she goes crazy. She goes, don't you ever touch me. And then, so they ask, like, well, where is this place? And then it goes, well, there's a town. Well, she also tells them that there's a town and that's where they're from, that the people that took their people. And it's run by this guy who's like Jim Jones. Jim Jones was a cult leader. So she tells him they'll run down, and then he goes, "Is there military? You know, like not their military. Like, do you know a way in? You know, because she goes like, are they secure?" Basically, he asks. And he goes, "Yeah, they have like paramilitary groups or wannabes that are. There's a wall and they surround the area." And then she basically says, "Yeah, there's a way in or whatever." So then he goes, "This is the girl who's Taken's father." Well, I don't know if he says Herschel, because that would be odd because that makes no fucking if Rick says Herschel, I gotta go back and listen. That would be like, what the fuck? Wouldn't Andrea have said we were at this farm? And besides that, wouldn't Andrea have told her about her entire journey while she lost her group of people at all? Maybe not, because Michonne didn't talk about hers. But I would assume in any relationship whatsoever, there's one person that probably divulges more than the other, no matter what. I've had relationships with people where I was always the one talking and divulging information, and the other person was like listening, and then would be basically a fucking stranger. Tell me little things, but not much, because they were very guarded, I guess. And those relationships never really last, because how can you have a relationship with someone that can never be themselves around you? So it doesn't work. So, you know, maybe that was the problem between Michonne and Andrea. But anyway. Yeah, so we cut back to Woodbury again in the little shack where Merle is interrogating where Merle's interrogating Glenn again, and Glenn tells him it's just a matter of time before they come looking for me. And he starts naming everyone, and he goes, Andrea, and Merle's like, really? And the way Merle said it or whatever, Glenn looked and he's like, oh, fuck, like something's wrong. How does he know that Andrea's not with us? Like, Glenn kind of knows something's not right here. How does he know? How did he catch me in a lie? What did I do? What was my tell? Herschel fixes up Michonne, and then the rest of the group are talking outside about going, and, well, actually, I think they're inside. And Beth's like, I'm going to go. We have to go. They're my family. And Oscar, which is one of the prisoners, he's like, why? How do we know if she's even telling the truth, or why are we going to go? And, like, basically, Daryl's like, I'll go, like, I'm going, like, I don't give a, like, this is like family. Like, this, like, Daryl has found his family. Daryl never had a family besides his brother. It was always him and Merle would run off too sometimes and come back, but it was always just them two. It was always Merle and his little brother, and so now he's got a family. Rick is like his new brother. Rick, and then this is his fucking family. I could assume that he was looking at Carol from that perspective, that's his mother, but it wasn't written like this. Especially the scene where Daryl leaves Carol and gives her the baby because they start packing up to leave. Michonne comes out and she looks at Beth as Beth's opening the gate for them. And Michonne's like, wasn't this place overrun by walkers? And she goes, yeah, it was. And she goes, and you guys took it all out? Like, she's like, what? And she goes, there was more of us. Just a few of you took it over. And she's like, there was more of us. Like, yeah, we lost people too. Two. And, and one didn't do anything. So then Rick talks to Carl. And he's like, listen, I know what you had to do. And he's trying to like comfort Carl. But Carl's so disassociated from anything. This is a totally different kid. And the whole thing with Judith, now that I'm thinking about it, because I also stopped reading the comics at a certain point. I think when, anyway, I stopped reading the comics at a certain point. But I know that Carl is like the big thing. He was like going to be the new leader. And anyway, I think I know why they stopped the comic. I think I talked about it in the last episode, which they said whatever reason they said, Robert Kirkman said, but I don't think that's the reason. But Carl is so disassociated from, I guess maybe he's not disassociated from reality. He's just accepted that this is the world and this is what he has to do. But then again, it will come back later as to him breaking down in a different way, because nothing's affecting him. He's accepted the fact that he had to kill his own mom. He's accepted the fact that this is what the world's like. And his father tells him, Rick's like, look, if something happens to me, he's like, we'll be fine. So like, he's really like in his own world now. And remember, the kid got shot and almost died last season. So, I mean, this kid's been through a lot already. And then having to kill your mom, I could see, you know, it's wild. This is wild. Also, this is where they named the baby finally, because Carl tells Rick, say, listen, Daryl's been calling the baby ass kicker. And then Rick starts to laugh and he goes, but I was thinking about giving the baby actual name. And they go, well, what were you thinking? He's like, well, my third grade English teacher's name, I think it's English teacher, whatever. His third grade teacher, her name was Judith. I think that's a nice name. And Rick agrees. So Shane's baby's name is Judith, because it's not Rick's. We all know it's not Rick's. So whatever. So then we waste a few minutes going back to Woodbury and doing the whole Andrea and Milton storyline. And you find out Milton was a loser. He had no family. He telecommuted, which means he worked from the internet before that was a main thing going on in 2019. So yeah, he was working from home. He had no friends. He had nobody. And he never saw anybody die. So he could never do these experiments. So we don't get to know what he actually did prior to this yet. I think they probably will mention it. They should. So I don't think he was a doctor. Or who knows what the fuck he was. So this old man dies, and we'll just get rid of that storyline now, so I don't have to go back to it. He dies, and Milton tries to bring him back to life, and when he's not bringing him back to life, when he turns into a walker, when the guy turns, Milton tries to do the test, and he says, oh, his finger moved, and Andrea's like, no, that's just a reflex. And she goes, no. So he starts taking out, untying the old man, and he lunges to kill Milton, and Andrea kills him right away. So Milton's shocked and probably shit his pants, and Andrea's like the fuck, stupid, or she's kind of sympathetic towards him because she's like, God, these people are so sheltered, they have no fucking idea. Then Merle comes in the room because Glenn won't give him a goddamn thing and throws a walker in there, and that's a cool scene. And Glenn, the actor Stephen Yeun, could have done a lot more in his career. He's done more than a lot of the other cast members of The Walking Dead, to be quite honest. I think he won a Golden Globe recently for a Netflix thing, so he's doing great. But you could tell he's a fantastic actor, and he manages to kill the walker even while he's stuck to a chair. So I don't know what Merle was trying to get. What if he died? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. He didn't tell him anything yet, and Merle just threw a walker in there. Didn't watch. He just walked out of the room. It was like a Batman trap, like the old 60s Batman thing where they go, will Batman survive? Tune in tomorrow night. Same bat time, same bat channel. But Glenn manages to, and the way he did it was cool. One of the armrests he takes and is a wooden armrest. He smashes that he's still taped to. He smashes into the walker's head, and he survives. And he starts screaming. And then Merle tells the governor and another guy what happened, and he's like, wow, he's this other guy, I forgot his name, Martinez, I think. He's like, he's pretty tough. He killed that walker in a few seconds. Like, maybe he was watching through a hole in the wall. And he goes, he asked him, did you talk to the girl yet? He goes, no. And this is where the comic is better than this in one aspect, but at the same time, looking at it in a different perspective, this was done pretty well. In the comic book, Michonne is graped, I have to say that because of YouTube, by the governor. And in this, the governor doesn't grape Maggie, but he belittles her, demeans her, and makes her think he's going to. But he decides not to. All while he asks her, where are you holed up? Where? And she won't answer. So he says, take off your shirt. So she takes it off, but she didn't hold a gun to her, which I don't know. You know, they should have made it a little bit more forceful. Like, why is she just willing to do this? Because she's scared or whatever the fuck. But she's like, I want to see Glenn. He's like, no. It's like whatever. So, but basically, he throws her over the table naked, and you know, looks like he's gonna do it, and then he doesn't, and then he walks away. Later, he brings her into Glenn, showing her, you know, she's covering herself. And I have to say, Maggie was fantastic. I was in love with her when she was on Supernatural, when she was younger. And even in here, she looks fantastic. She also should be doing much more than she's doing. But women have it a lot harder. And that's not being woke or whatever the fuck. I've been saying this for since 2010, that women have it much harder in Hollywood than men do. So they show naked Maggie to Glenn. Glenn gets emotional, and he's like, oh, he's gonna do something, and the governor goes to grab his gun, and he's like, no, stop, we'll kill you. And he goes, one of you is gonna tell us what blah blah blah. And then he already knows that she's not going to, and that Glenn's not going to. That Glenn won't do it. No matter what, Glenn is definitely not gonna say, because he got beat the fuck up, because Merle beat almost, like, Glenn looks horrible. Glenn looks like he was fucked up for a month. Worse than Daryl. Remember when they tortured Daryl in season 6 just by keeping him in a room, and it broke Daryl? They beat the living crap. They were like torturing Glenn in this, and in a few hours, and he has bruises and everything and bleeding all over, and he will not give it up. And he killed a walker in like 10 minutes or 10 seconds. So he's not going to give it up. And the governor already knows this, but the governor knows that she wants to see Glenn. She loves Glenn. And he already, if he thinks that the governor did this ain't gonna work either. He ain't gonna say nothing. He'll kill the governor. So the governor points the gun at Glenn, and then Maggie says everything. Maggie says, we're at the prison. And it goes, the one up, yeah. How many of you are there? 10. And this pisses the governor off even more. The governor's like, what the fuck? There's only 10 of you? And he gets mad at Merle, and he goes, there's only 10 of them, and they managed to take over something you told me couldn't be done. That he's like, what the, like, I want to know I want you to go over there. I want to find out. I want you to scout and see what are we dealing with. And then he asks Merle, I want to know where your allegiances are, because your brother's with this group, you know? And then Merle says, I'm with you. But you can tell. Also, there was a scene in that moment where the governor walks out after, he starts petting like Maggie, like thank you, or being like sexual with her, and then he walks out, and then Merle looks, and then Maggie runs to Glenn and starts holding him, but Merle looks at Glenn, and this is the director's fault. I didn't look who directed this episode. Michael Rooker was giving like he already, how can I say this? I don't know if the script was ready for him to read the next episode after this, probably not, but you could already tell he was giving, in that scene, in that little brief second that they show Michael Rooker's face, because they don't focus on him really that much, that he was like not cool with what just happened, and more so like that that's something he don't fuck around with. Even though Merle maybe says shit and talks dirty and fucked up to girls or whatever, like he was not cool with that, and he was looking at him like, this is fucked up, like this is some fucked up shit. And he knows how the governor really is, which he tells later on. We'll see in later episodes. But that's that. At the same time, this is one of the coolest parts in this episode too. So Rick and them are going to go scout out Woodbury and try to rescue their people, and they end up parking the car to walk a few miles till they get to the Woodbury. They get swarmed by walkers. They run into a house. There's a guy who basically has dementia, I would assume. That's what it is, because he doesn't know what's going on, or he just lives in the woods and he has no idea what's been going on at all. But I think it's more like he has dementia or something, because his dog is dead on the floor, and he's living like in this little cabin by himself. So they run into this cabin thinking like it's empty, and they find this guy, and he has a gun, and he's pointing at them, and he's bugged out, and he's like, I'm gonna call the cops, I'm gonna do this, and they're like, what the fuck, there are walkers outside, and you could see he's confused. So he's like, what the fuck, he doesn't understand what that even means, kind of, and he goes, I'm gonna call the cops. He goes, I am a cop, Rick tells him. He goes, let me see your badge. And then he's, Rick goes to move the gun because he doesn't have a badge to show him anymore, and the gun goes off, almost hits Daryl, and then they start struggling, and the guy runs to run out the door to let the walkers in, but he does not. He's just running out. He's not trying to let him in because he has no idea what the fuck's out there. And Michonne fucking stabs him in his arm, but somehow he dies, or maybe he went through his neck. I don't know what the fuck. It looked like it went through his arm. And then they decide to use the walker as a way to get out. They throw the walker out the front door. All the walkers. I mean, they throw the man in front. They throw the man to the walkers. The walkers start eating the man like rabid animals, and they head out the back and they get out. That was very, very cool, and this was a very good, very, like, this episode was good. This show was good, and these were the things that made the show fucking fantastic. There was a lot of blood. You could see they do little camera tricks so you don't see guts or anything like that. So that was interesting. And and then they get to Woodbury, and that's when the governor is talking to Merle about these people and how he's upset and whatever. And he's like, they could be around, and he asks him about his allegiance. And then they're scoping out. The music is fucking great, and you see like them outside looking at Woodbury at the wall, watching the people monitoring the wall, the soldiers or the guards. And then we go inside and we see Andrea walking by with a gun over her shoulder, and then it goes into her going into the room with the governor in the governor's bedroom and or apartment, and the governor asked, did Milton find what he was looking for? And she goes, no. And then she just turns around and goes, it's like all this because, and what I don't understand, the one thing I really don't understand out of all this, yes, maybe they have the prison, but you already know that Andrea was part of this group, and that Glenn, and you kidnapped Glenn and his girlfriend, and you didn't have to do all this. Like, if they knew Andrea, okay, so Andrea was with them, so they're not terrible people, because look what Andrea did. And maybe if they're still alive and they're not that far, and if they managed to take over the prison prior to you beating the shit out of Glenn, maybe we could have talked to them and bring them into our group. We could use a guy like that or that type of people to go whatever. No, they went the governor went about it, well, Merle really, and then the governor just hiding and keeping this from Andrea, not even bringing it up. Means he's not trustworthy of any outsiders whatsoever, and the only reason why he trusted Andrea and Michonne is because of Andrea, and maybe he thought that Michonne would be a good soldier, but I don't know. I don't think he would ever accepted Michonne either. What it seems like, it just seems like he wanted Andrea. That's the only thing he wanted. He found her attractive, and that's what he wanted. Could have made it more obvious for sure. Besides, teasing everybody that, he was willing to accept Michonne, but whatever. This episode makes you really not like the governor. They did a good job with that. And it makes you really admire Glenn's acting and fucking Maggie. Fantastic couple together. They were great. They were fucking beautiful. That's why it was, what happens later on in season 6 works so well because of how good they were. And in this episode, you can even tell it was perfect, and Daryl talking, there's scenes with him talking to Rick, and you can see they're like brothers. They bonded now because Rick's like, thank you for doing it. He's like, well, that's what we do. Like, that's like, we're family. Yeah. Good episode. Really good episode. I like this episode a lot. Yeah. So that's that. Anyway, I kind of like doing these, even though nobody's watching. So I might do it. I might do it the way I'm doing it now, which is actually watching it every week, not watching it and trying to record as many as I possibly can, so I could have them ready. This episode made me like it. It's not like other shows I watched that I'm like, oh, please, God, I don't want to do this. I like this so far. Who knows? It might get to that point where I don't want to do this. But anyway, I will talk to you guys next time. Peace.